let's focus on the processes. What are those that require the greatest refinements? Because you guys are doing a lot of things right. So we want to keep on doing those, but what are the frustrations, the challenges for you guys? So sharing is caring part of the program too. So what did you come up with? Yes, thank you.
I think you start with pre-construction.
All right.
There needs to be a pre-construction handoff.
Say the last part again.
There needs to be a pre-construction handoff where we all meet, estimating team, project manager, superintendents, just like you started in the beginning. I handed a big pile of.
Yeah, it's funny because I have a couple clients that call pre-construction the dump meeting. They call it the poop meeting, P-O-O-P. And it's interesting, so they'll tell me they have pre-construction planning, but they have these things, like I said, the dump or the poop. And it goes something like this. You walk into the estimator's office and they say, okay, ready? Here are the plans, here's the specs, here's the customer list, here's the map to the job site, here's your submittals, here's your change order log, here's your sub list. You got any questions? Okay, good luck. And I'm not saying for any estimators in the room that's how you do things, but we set the land speed record to get this superintendent and this project manager up to speed. And unfortunately, is that planning? The answer is no. That's a part of the process, but if that's where Benning's process ends, where we do the dump and go, that's not right. Planning, the quick litmus test for this is it a dictation or is it a collaboration? And that's for you guys to answer, not for me. Once again, are we actually going through collectively as the PM super going, all right, how are we going to build this thing? What do we need to do to knock the cover off the ball? How do we make Mr. and Mrs. Publix the happiest people in the world? And how do we finish strong? Let's game plan that. And we're going to talk more about pre-construction a little bit later. But I agree. Start with the beginning. What's another area that requires some improvement at Benning?
Communication.
Communication.
Ding, 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 ding.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I didn't know if that was the video camera or someone's phone.
I thought I won something.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
So who's our volunteer? All right, thank you. It'll be painless, I promise. It'll only hurt for the 15 minutes.
It was telling me to breathe. My wife was telling me to breathe, and I'm sitting there breathing. So I got silent, and
So
I got ding out. Ding, 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 ding. I forgot to breathe.
Heartbeat, clear.
Breathing.
So we'll see if we get any other volunteers because your Fitbit going off probably isn't fair. But anyway.
Especially if it just has to tell him to breathe.
Breathe.
He's that fit that he has to be told to breathe and everything else. So what do you mean by communication? That's a very broad thing. So what's communication mean? Whoever said it, I don't know.
Well, there's several instances, especially with changes that the stores make and it going up the chain to get back down to whoever's on the job and to get the materials or whatever and the actual clearance to go ahead and do it. Because, I mean, we can't just, okay, let's order all these materials and do it because somebody said to. It's got to go up the chain and then back down.
Right, because then you have to tell the respective trade partners if they have to change out the switch gear or the light fixtures or whatever. But I agree. It's interesting, I was telling Darcy before we started in my old organization, we had a business development director who was a little like a bobblehead doll. The customer would say, do you have this in your proposal? Sure, got it. Do you have this? Yeah. And so suffice to say, the PM and the super were always put in a very awkward position. The way this worked was, we would go ahead and get ready to start doing a phase. Now, during the proposal process, let's say there was a dumpster screen that wasn't clarified on the drawings. The customer would ask our BD person, say, do you have this? Sure, got it. But he would never convey back to us that we had the dumpster screen. So we'd go out there, we'd gonna kind of go and start talking about, hey, there'll be $10,000 for the dumpster screen. How do you think the customer reacted to that? Customer was like, I told you to get this job, you had to turn that in for free. Now you're hitting me up for a change order? So, bad communication. Now, who's at fault? Is it Pate or our salesperson? Is it the operations? Is it the customer? Is it just not communicating effectively? But whether it's, changes to drawings, why do you think communication is so bad? Why do you think it's bad?
It's not necessarily
There's too
bad,
much
but
of
it
it.
goes between our project managers to Publix, and then Publix has got to send it back. It's just so many people involved with making the decision that it just gets switched
By
around.
the time the decision's made, it might be too late to try to get back into it.
Plus, it's a little bit telephone game. I have to tell him, he tells him, he tells him, by the time it comes back to Greg, it's like when you were a kid and played the telephone game. You said something just a moment ago. What did you just say? About
Too much of it.
Too much of it. Yeah. Whether it's your watch telling you to breathe or the fact you're getting text messages, emails, phone messages, voice messages. Some of you have your desk phone on top of that. You have an answer machine at home. Are we getting just pounded with information? How much of that communication is valuable, though? The answer is, you could probably do the 80-20 rule. 20% of it is actually important, but in a world of noise, just watch any news channel. And if you prefer, because news is somewhat polarizing today, just watch TV and watch ESPN, for instance. You got stuff on the side, you got stuff on the bottom, you got the talking heads on the screen. I'm like, I'm being peppered with information. How much of this stuff is the stuff I need, though? And you can probably say it's sports, you don't need any of it. But we have so much communication, but how much of it is truly valuable? That's the key. What's another area of improvement? So we only have 2 things. That's pretty good.
Post-job analysis.
Post-job. Why does Mr. Estimator care about post-job? Why is that important to your group?
Lesson learned.
Yeah, if you keep bidding it the same way, you're not getting any feedback. Hey, don't use Brand X Construction. They're a horrible sub. Now, you might say, well, they're cheap, and I'm going to keep using them. On the other hand, there's the question of, what about just cost, general conditions? If you look at the cost report, you go, well, we hit budget, we must be on target. But in the field, things are happening. I'll give you a good for instance. I have plenty of clients where they'll play this game called diamond dusting. I know this doesn't happen at Benning, so I'm going to let you in on a little dirty little secret here. Some companies play this game when it comes to budgeting. This was a drywall company that this happened. For all my friends in here that know how to do drywall, you frame it, hang the drywall, finish the drywall. It's a pretty simple process. Well, they had 3 buckets of money. So the estimator would put money in here, money in here, money in here. And I asked this company, I said, how do you do in your work? What's your weakest area of work? Without fail, which area do you think they said they did the worst on? Finishing drywall. Isn't that interesting? Why did they say finishing drywall? Is it that hard to finish drywall in this world?
Labor.
I wish I could say it was that. What was happening was this. They're framing, putting the framing up, charging their hours, and they go, uh-oh, I've overrun my labor budget. You know what I'll do? I'll put it in the drywall bucket. So I start hanging drywall. Uh-oh, I'm overrunning the drywall bucket, no pun intended. What do I do now? Put it in the finishing bucket. Skimming the wall, uh-oh, but I'm out of buckets. The reality is they might have been good at finishing drywall. The answer is we don't know. But if an estimator looked at this and saw that cost report, they'd go, wow, we're great at hanging drywall, we're great at framing, but we suck at skimming or finishing. That's a lack of integrity in the process. It goes back to communication. It also just goes back to not having an autopsy. Look, we call it estimating for a reason. Otherwise, we call it accurating. We're not accurate. It's estimating, but we got to have that feedback loop. And more importantly, we have to do something constructive about it. We also have to capture these lessons learned. How old are you? And I don't mean to pick on you, but how old?
25.
25 years old. You know, Do you have a lot to learn?
Oh, yeah.
You and me both. I'm 46. I've got a whole lot to learn still. Now, even if I found the oldest person in this room, I would hope if I asked you, do you have things to learn? You would say, absolutely. The point is, how do we make someone that's 25 smarter? We have to share this knowledge. I'm sure we have some, you can tell I like a lot of music here with my Bon Jovi reference. Bon Jovi, by the way, was an artist in the 80s. I'm busting your chops. One of my young guys, we were talking about like hard rock, and he turned to me and goes, Greg, I don't know who that Def Leppard is. I'm like, are you? But anyway, how do we make a person that's 25? We have to share the coconut telegraph. Sure, if we have some Buffett fans in here, you know what I'm talking about. Gotta just make it. I go to someone and ask them about information, but at the size you all are, there should be some sort of library, repository. Give me one other area of improvement that we have to work on. What'd you guys come up with here at this front table?
Standardizing procedures.
Any specific procedures, or just kind of all of the above?
All of it.
Yeah, you know, if you guys, I have a buddy who lives down in Sarasota, Florida. He runs, actually his company has grown dramatically. Now, when I say grown dramatically, he was a $500,000 a year business. He's now probably doing a couple $1 million a year business. Now, to be honest with you, that's what he wants to be. He doesn't want to be Benning at 100 to 120 million. I mean, he likes where he is. But he'll often take me to dinner, and we'll sit. We went to Florida together, and he would say, Greg, I want to pick your brain. You get to work with all these companies around the world. Tell me what I should do. And you know what? The advice I give, and by the way, I charge a lot for this information. Nothing, Jess. He goes, nothing? What do you mean? Like, Jess, you got a healthy business. You're doing the right things. You have everything under control. I said, you don't want to grow to be a $100, $125 million a year business. You want to be a $1 million a year business. That you can control. So to talk about processes and procedures, you know what? It's the Jess process. That's what's working for him. Now, if he came to me and says, Greg, I want to become a $20 million contractor in Sarasota, Bradenton, Tampa, that's a different ball of wax. Folks, you are of the size that not having the Benning way is a detriment. I can tell you, this group has grown dramatically since I started working with you. You can testify to this, you know, since, what was it, 7, 8 years ago is when we did it? It seemed like it wasn't that long ago, but it was 7, 8 years ago. I was working with you guys last. How much have you grown in that time? This room is a testament to it. So not having that way is where we need to go. I want to do an exercise for a moment, though, to show you what the real challenge of this actually is. Some of you are already doing this. I want you to go ahead and cross your arms for me. Really simple. Now, look at which arm is on top. In this case, my left arm happens to be on top. Drop your arms by your side. Now, cross your arms, but put the other arm on top. Isn't it weird? Now, okay, we only have a couple hours here. All right, good. The moral of the story is this is a simple behavioral change. I can't even do it for long. It doesn't feel right. I like my left arm on top. Same action, same end result is that my arms are crossed. But how many of you felt uncomfortable there for a moment? All of you. Now, let's take it another way. We need to change operations and procedures. We need to standardize the Benning way. Just those words alone to some of you are kryptonite. In fact, they're probably just making you anxious, me even talking about it. But Greg, I've done it this way for 15 years, 25 years. I have the Gregg way of doing things. Well, the simple fact is, there probably is some things you do really well as an individual, and how do we harness those things, but how do we move towards doing it the same way? Imagine a football team, and you see this in a lot of organizations. We're not going to pick on any one particular professional team, but look at some of the organizations, actually I will pick on them. Look at like the Redskins. How many of you are Redskins fans? Anyone in here? What does Dan Snyder, he's the owner of the Redskins, what does he do every single year? Other than getting the #1 pick usually because they're horrible. He goes out and gets free agents, doesn't he? He goes out and that guy's a good wide receiver, so I'll pay him $1 gazillion, and you're a good running back, I'm going to pay you $1 gazillion. And he brings in some talented people. But why are they always in last place or close to it?
Because they're not following the process.
There's no necessarily an institutional way.
Don't have a quarterback.
that too. But that could be part of the problem. They paid a couple guys that were talented people and said, I'm going to make you my franchise quarterback. And we throw money at the problem. But at the end of the day, why are and I know this is a raw subject for the Atlanta fans here, but why are the Patriots so successful year after year?
Buy into the Patriot way.
Exactly. You buy into the Patriot way. Look, I'm not a Patriots fan either. I'm not even really a professional football fan for that matter, but I will tell you this. There's something to be said about the Patriots and what they do. And it has nothing to do with massage parlor down in South Florida. Too soon? Yeah, too soon. However, one of the things that Bill Belichick, and people, you either love him or you hate him. But I can tell you there's some very interesting things about him. It's very Saban-esque, and that does kind of hit home for me because I'm an SEC guy. You know what? They're almost cut from the same cloth. That's how similar they are. But one of the phrases that Bill Belichick talks about is, do your job. What do you think that means when they say, do your job? It sounds so basic.
Stay in your lane.
Stay in your lane, bro. Stay in your lane. How often have we heard this? And I hear it a lot from companies that go, everyone here just, I can tell you what estimating's not doing right. Let me tell you all the things that they're doing wrong. And let me tell you what my field, oh my gosh, my field's a train wreck, Greg. They're not doing this. How often does Bill Belichick tolerate that kind of stuff? Actually, he doesn't. Probably the only person he tolerates it from is probably Brady, but the moral of the story is you do it the Patriots way, you do your job. You won't have to worry about anybody else because you know what? They're doing their job. And we all toe the line. You run this playbook, if you go rogue and run your own playbook, there's the door. It's that simple. And you wonder, is that where the Redskins go wrong? Or some of these other teams that just don't seem to get it. They bring in a lot of talent, but they don't ever make that talent successful. They don't ever bring in new ideas. These are the things that we have a talented group here at Benning. In fact, I'm not just blowing smoke, you all are incredibly talented. I work with a lot of organizations that do not nearly have your capabilities, your group, your camaraderie, your sense of family and loyalty. Trust me, there are a lot of firms out there. But we have to think about what is that Benning way. So, which brings me to this one here. This is our second case study. The simple story behind this, they're a steel erector in Detroit, Michigan. They're actually, I believe, one of the largest, if not the largest steel erector in the country. They do a lot of work for the auto dealerships, or not auto dealers, auto manufacturers, I should say. And they actually built Little Caesars Arena, which is where the Red Wings play. Point was, there was no succession planning in this company. In their estimating group, this was the ages of the estimating group. 51, 63, 64, 66, 69, 82. Now, folks, I get it. 55 is the new 35. I'm happy with that. The moral of the story is, when I asked them about that young project manager, or excuse me, young estimator who was, 55? He was a project engineer. And I said, project engineer, he's 55 years old. And and been with the company for 10 years. I said, guys, when are you going to take the training wheels off? I mean, he's going to collect Social Security soon. Can we make him a project estimator? He's not quite ready yet. And that was this mentality. But that was a microcosm for a bigger problem. Their superintendents didn't develop the next group. A lot of this was because they had a lot of cowboys doing it their own way. And you'll notice the phrase up there, emotional baggage. I interviewed, a lot like I interviewed a lot of you folks. One of their project superintendents came in. This guy was, he was in his mid-50s. He was a young guy for the most part, but came in. The guy looked like he was 82 years old. And he sits down in front of me. He goes, Greg, he goes, my wife left me. I'm on heart medication, anxiety medication. Did I mention heart medication? I'm going to therapy. And I'm kind of sitting there going, dude, I'm a process guy. I'm not a therapist by any stretch. But he goes, Greg, this place has taken its toll on me. He goes, I have aged like in dog years here. This is awful. The word he used was toxic workplace. By the way, did I mention they're the largest steel contractor in America, doing some amazing projects, yet they couldn't get their stuff together. One of the things that they did focus on was what we call the job loop. The idea of saying, all right, we need to institutionalize a way of doing things. Much like the mechanical contractor, how do we make the way? Because one of the big things they found was, so they had a cultural problem which was kind of affecting operations. It's like Reese's peanut butter cups. Is it the chocolate or is it the peanut butter? And it was a little bit of both, because how do you create better operations when no one is in this when everyone's in this toxic environment? The other one is, how do you get rid of the toxic environment when you have no operations? That was a little bit of the challenge, but they started slowly to transform. One of the first things they had to do was confront the brutal facts. And you know what? They brought everyone in and said, guys, we let you down. We know we haven't been a great organization. We haven't supported you. And you know what? The team owned it. They said, it's on us. We got to figure out how to fix that. But we're going to ask you to make some improvements too. The good news is Benning is nowhere close to this company. But this is that kind of warning for all. In a hot market, we can confuse a lot of things. I use the phrase, don't confuse the rising tide that's raising all ships for business success. Right now, the market's pretty good. You know what? The market's pretty good for everybody. You don't need to be Warren Buffett to be successful right now. You want to know business genius? Look at business genius when the economy goes to poop in a handbasket. That's when the business genius comes out. How do you stay successful and do it successfully year in, year out when there is no good market? That to me is success. And that's why this operations is so important. So I'm sure we have some Jeff Foxworthy fans in the room. This list came about myself and my colleagues. We have what are called summit meetings. And we sit in these summit meetings. They're incredibly riveting, I can assure you. And we talk about all the things we hear from you guys. And this list is a culmination. So you might be reactive if. You notice that key word up there, reactive. Well, the opposite to that is what? Proactive. So everything I want you to be thinking about today comes through the lens of, are you reactive or are you proactive in how you do things? These are warning signs. So some of the comments we've heard, Greg, we don't have time to plan. Our jobs, unfortunately, they start on Monday, we're awarded it on Sunday. We just don't have time to plan our jobs. Greg, things change too much to plan, which then evokes the question, if they're changing, how do you know because you didn't have a plan to begin with? It's kind of that tree falling in the forest thing. We'll figure it out in the field. For my supers in the room, you probably love this one, don't you? Just give it to Mikey. Mikey will figure it out, like that old cereal commercial, Our field superintendents are brilliant, so just hand them a book and, amen, they'll figure it out. I love this one. We'll order 80% of the materials and the foreman can handle the rest. I'll come back to that one in just a moment. Our jobs are different, Greg, here in Atlanta, Tampa, Seattle, Moscow. You don't understand, Greg. We're different here at Benning. I hate to tell you this, guys. No, you're not. I've seen it. I'm like that, what is it, the Farmers commercial, the one with, where he says, been there, done that. I've seen it. You guys are not that different, and that's not an insult. It's just a simple fact. You have customers, you build projects, you have challenges. Guess what? So does everybody else. Suck it up, Buttercup. How do we get over those hurdles? And more importantly, you do that through these operations. Blame lack of planning on our customers, the time constraints. Moving field managers and crews constantly. I don't think this is probably a problem at Benning, but some of your peers in this world, you get to about 90% done on a project and the superintendent leaves. Where does the superintendent go? To the next part. But wait a second, there's 10% left, isn't there? So who's going to do that last 10%?
Project manager.
Oh, the project manager. How well do you do at that?
It's tough.
I appreciate your honesty. By the way, so let's just say you don't do it as well as the superintendent that was on the job because you're not a superintendent. What does the customer remember? How you start or how you finish? How you finish? Oh, but we're not doing a good job of finishing. So what goes in the customer's mind at that last point when they're getting ready to award the next project? You guys just can't get off this project. You know, you took the super, you sent them somewhere else. We call it the superintendent shuffle. It's the new dance that's shaking the nation right now. Well, how do we get away from that? And folks, I'm a realist. I know that we don't have a bench of superintendents that we just kind of say, okay, you go in, you know, like we're 4 deep at quarterback or something. How do we do this, though, to where we don't hurt the closeout of a project? Constant phone and radio noise. I mentioned my previous company. The company we worked with, we had a superintendent, his name was Jay. This guy had, and this is a little bit dated, but I remember it like it was yesterday, 2 cell phones and a pager. I don't even think they make pagers anymore. But he had 2 cell phones and a pager. And we all would look at Jay and we go, damn, Jay is busy. Busy. Boom. Let me ask you this. Hold on a second. Would you all agree with that statement?
No.
Yeah, actually, that is not true. Activity does not necessarily equal productivity. But anytime we saw Jay was on the phone, cell phone. I mean, he was like double fisting phones, checking the pager, on the phone. I mean, he was just, but we would look at his cell phone bills every month. And, you know, we would see Jay used 100 minutes this month. And then next month, it would be 125. We'd have to keep up with his minutes. We go, wow, Jay's our best superintendent ever. You know what? Jay was a horrible superintendent. You know why? Because all he was active. In fact, some of our best superintendents, we had a guy named Doug. This guy was like a master. He was 6'10", 380 pounds. He was like a linebacker. Maybe that was the recipe of success. But you know what? You never saw him sweat. He never looked like he was about to have a heart attack. Why? Because his jobs were planned out. They were orchestrated. He didn't have the best projects, meaning like we didn't give him the cake jobs. We gave him the most complicated ones, and they ran like a well-oiled machine. Did he do a lot of work? Absolutely. But he was proactive, not reactive. Last minute, large number of small purchases made in the field, last minute needs, which kind of go hand in hand, and very little or no formalized planning. That second to last one and the third one there is actually a contractor I worked with in DC. They're a concrete contractor, as a for instance. And their CFO called me up and says, Greg, we have a problem with our shop guy, or they call him the yard manager. And I asked him, I said, why? What's wrong with your yard manager? He goes, he's just not very good. I said, well, that's an interesting thing. He goes, yeah, we're thinking about trading him out. We're not really sure, what. Let's come in and talk to him. Well, I talked to him. His name's Rashawn. Talked to Rashawn. We sat down. He's the nicest guy in the world. I hit a nerve, though, when I asked him this question. I said, how many calls do you get a day for last-minute needs from the field? Rashawn's eyes got about this big. And he goes, can I be honest? I said, yeah, it's kind of why I'm here. He said, Greg, our guys are the worst. In the time that we've been sitting here, I have gotten 10 phone calls from superintendents. They need this. Well, when do they need it? 2:30 today. I said, well, it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I know, that's part of the problem. But when I can't get it to them, who gets blamed? Rashawn. And their problem wasn't a Rashawn problem, it was a field problem. Because they weren't being proactive. They weren't thinking ahead. Now, when I talked to the superintendents, they thought Rashawn was, their own personal gopher. Just call him up and he'll make it happen. And why bother to plan? I'll just call him up and he'll send all the stuff I need. That is not the way to live. You might say, well, Greg, the good news is we don't have Rashawn. But what about trade contractors? We call them up on Friday. Hey, you gonna be out here Saturday? You gonna be out here Monday morning? It's Friday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. How do you want me to get a crew out there first thing Monday morning? Hey, get out here, otherwise, we'll start back charging you. Once again, our job is to set our subs up for success and plan it out. Does that take forethought? Yep. Does that take management? Yep. Does that take you and the PMs working together? Yes. And I get it, folks. There are emergencies. Weather. The customer issues. But we have to move the pendulum. We're never going to get rid of emergencies because that's the way life is. But if we live in the world of that red, we're in a lot of trouble, folks. That's how we have to get away from. Which brings me to this piece right here. This is a company up in North Kakalaka. They actually work in what's called the triangle, the research triangle. So most of their clients are pharma, biotech companies. Give you an idea, one of their projects was roughly about an $8 million mechanical job. So it's a pretty big job. The PM at the start of the job bought out the materials. However, he only bought 80% of the materials at the start of the job. Why do you think he only bought 80% and not 100%?
Waste, concerned about waste.
I wish I could say it was that. Why else do you think? What's sir?
Hopefully get it done for the 80%.
He was hoping, optimistic, still not the right answer. You know what it was? Go bless you. The simple answer was this. The superintendent came coming to him every day. Hey man, you got my purchase orders written? You order my materials? No, I'm too busy. I'm too busy. Finally, he was kind of like that parent that kind of brushed off the kid. He kind of goes, you know what? I'll buy 80% of the materials to shut him up. And you know what? I'll order the last 20% when I get unbusy. All right, everyone, with a show of hands, when was the last time any of you got unbusy? Oh, you guys didn't do that either? Well, neither did he. So what happened on this particular project, the field bought out the last 20% of the materials with field purchase orders. And I don't know if you can read that number up on the screen, but the field purchase orders for that 20% was 4,500 field purchase orders. Now, here's the little part that I want you to put your consulting hat on for a second. So they brought me in, they said, Greg, this didn't happen really, this is not a good story for us. 4,500 purchase orders. This company works 4 10-hour days, so Monday through Thursday. So they handed me a stack of paper, and they said, Greg, look at the stack of paper. There were 8 tickets to Home Depot. 8 tickets to Home Depot, and on the tickets were like 2 sticks of all thread, some sweeping compound, some, mastic or something else, like ticky-tack stuff. Except, I can assure you, this is what happened in the field. Hey boss, last screw, let me get in my truck. Let me go to Home Depot and go buy another box of screws. So what happens? Gets in a truck. Did you follow the math there for a second? 8 tickets to Home Depot alone. They only work 4 days a week. So that was 2 times a day on average the superintendent was running to the big box store. By the way, if you were a mechanical contractor, do you think shopping at Home Depot is a particularly inexpensive way to go about doing your work? Where do mechanical guys go? Where do electrical guys go? Painters go. I don't care what contractor it is. Where do you guys go? Hopefully, I'm sure you do go to Home Depot every now and again. The moral of the story is you probably shop at specific stores for construction. The once in a blue moon, going to get a push broom at Home Depot is a different story. But this company lost a boatload of money, a ton of money. In labor, because they weren't efficient. By the way, when the superintendent is going to Home Depot, what's happening on the job site?
No management.
Yeah, and it's not because the crew is lazy. It's not like Herbert at the beginning of the slide deck here. This is a situation, last screw, well, let's just sit and wait. This'll work, let's just wait it out. Well, they lost money in labor, they lost money in materials, the customer wasn't happy, so they probably lost profitability. So the owner comes to me at the end and says, Greg, now that you've digested all of this information, who would you blame? It's kind of a weird thing to have a CEO. It'd be like Ted sitting me down and saying, who should I blame here? Should I be estimating? Should I be... That's kind of a weird comment. He goes, so do you think we should blame the superintendent? It was interesting that that was the first person he said. I said, well, yes, the superintendent has a share of the blame. I mean, where was his plan day to day, week to week? That's a good one. He goes, okay, what about the project manager? I said, okay, project manager probably can share some of that blame. He goes, well, Greg, I'm glad we had this conversation. I said, whoa, 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 stop the clock. Guess what? What about you? Moi? I'm the president of the company. I didn't do anything wrong. I wasn't even running that project. No, nor were you running the business. I said, when were you going to step in? When were you going to step in and go, you know what? We're at 1,000 purchase orders here. We're going the wrong direction here. I said, were you waiting till you hit 5,000 purchase orders before you actually stepped in? I said, you should have seen, there was a conference room table just like that, and there were stacks, week to week, of just purchase order after purchase order. By the way, how many accounting people do you think they had to have in this company to manage that? Now, I know in the day and age where we're going, paperless or digital, these were a bunch of men and women that had to just go through and herd the cats. In this case, herd the paper. All because we weren't doing it efficiently. Now, I tell you this story just simply to get you, say it scared straight. Hopefully none of this has ever happened on any of your projects. And you might say, well, Greg, the good news is we don't have that much labor. It's all subs. But do you set your subs up to be successful? Or is this a microcosm of what we may or may not do in our organization? So, before we go too much further, we've been going at it about an hour and a half. I know your butt's probably getting there, especially if you're on those back chairs, because they suck.